Welcome to this Last of Us 2 review. I've just finished my playthrough. You can catch that on the rest of the channel. And I thought I would do a full kind of in-depth review of the game because it deserves it. It's a great game. So we'll start off with the gameplay. Now, the gameplay is flawless. If you know the first game, then you'll know that the gameplay is exceptional. From the visuals to sound to the combat, there's very little to fault. Visually, the game is really stunning. It manages to put the full potential of the PS4 generation into use. And when this PS5 patch comes out at some point, I imagine it'll just look better on there, run better, smoother, the whole lot. The scenery looks great. And while most of the game takes place in rain-soaked Seattle, which looks incredible, the wintry Jackson and sun-kissed Santa Barbara are both equally strong standout sceneries and manage to hold their own without being too similar to the previous game either. For me, Seattle is the true winner, obviously. The open world part in Day 1 completely encapsulates the ruined world in which the characters live, with bright, open ruins and dark, dangerous interiors. Both the bank and the courthouse have some incredible lighting effects, with strong sun rays that eke throughout the darkness in both. As Seattle continues, the torrential rain falls. Naughty Dog could have fallen at the water hurdle, lots of games do, but it looks good, it looks realistic. Sometimes the hair looks a little shiny in the rain, but generally it just adds to the somber mood. I love the whole vibe of Seattle. Visually, it captures the harsh storyline. There are no faults with the visuals of the game, for everything from fire, rain, and the blood splatters are horrifically spectacular. Facial features, emotion is carried through. The motion capture on this game is just incredible. Sound-wise, going with the visuals, it's probably the least standout point. I mean, the soundtrack is incredible. The guitar, it's just wild. That strumming of the guitar that Gustavo Santaolalla plays, it's just wow. It's just incredible. The infected, they sound as terrifying as ever. If anything, the clickers are more terrifying than in the first game. And little spoiler alert: the new infected, them shamblers they are not pleasant to listen to, and they really are intimidating. Equally as stomach churning is the death sounds, from screams caused by a perfect sniper shot that generally made me uncomfortable, to death rattles as Ellie slices a poor wolf's throat. The sounds of death in this game are enough to make you want to stop the violence. However, I did feel that the gunshots lacked heaviness or weight, an issue I felt in the first game, although the El Diablo pistol sounded so bloody good in that game. For me, the gunshots just did not make the gunfight seem overly chaotic, which is strange because as a whole, open combat in this game is mental. I just found that the gunshots did nothing to help this feeling though, which is a shame because they could have really upped the tension in some parts. They just sounded a little bit too metallic, a bit too kind of popping rather than, brutal and heavy, which I think they should have sounded, would have added a lot more to the game. Past the visuals and sound, gameplay itself is perfect. Scavenging for supplies feels like there is never quite enough, and I often found myself having to really conserve ammo at times. You never quite have enough to make silencers or shivs. It's always balanced between I've got to kill this person, but at the same time, what's the best way to do it most efficiently? Speaking of the combat, it is gritty, it's harsh, it's scary. Fighting infected requires stealth and patience, otherwise you'll often get overwhelmed, which isn't good because even the runners can take you out quickly if there's more than one. Or worse, a clicker will one-shot you as you attempt to escape the onslaught. So you've got to use stealth when possible. Same goes for human enemies. Stealth is definitely the way to go, but it's much more unforgiving than with infected. Humans see you quicker and the scars will see you faster than the wolves do. They also react as they detect you, which is quite a nice little feature rather than straight up detecting you and that being it. It's nothing or that. They will often go over to investigate or warn others that they think something is there. The difference in the way human AI works gives another layer to combat and forces you to adjust depending on who you're fighting. Often I found that the scars would see you quicker, they'd often spot you if you're hiding in the grass, whereas the WLF were much more prone to kind of not noticing you as much in stealth, but being a lot more aggressive and tactical in the gunfights. I mean, overall, I loved the combat in this game. Hand to hand was brutal, gunfights felt tense, and the stealth was satisfying. You can't really fault it at all, really. Another cool part to the gameplay, and this is a spoiler, so skip ahead, is the difference between playing as Ellie and playing as Abby. Ellie definitely leans towards stealth, with her knife that can be used to take down clickers in one, as opposed to Abby, who you must invest the in-game equivalent of skill points, the little pills that you find about, in order to be able to make shivs which break after one use. Plus, you only have a limited number of shivs, whereas Ellie's knife is apparently invincible. This makes approaches to stealth as Abby a little more difficult. Conversely, the shivs allow for quick escapes from grapples, which Ellie cannot do. The difference in the two playstyles makes each character feel different and reflects their own characteristics. The one part of the gameplay I found strange was the clear-cut ending to encounters. Many times I felt like I was still in danger, only for a character to say, "Is that all of them?" and holster their weapon. To me, this was a bit too jarring as a way to end an encounter. I would have much rather the game not let you know so abruptly. As a whole, though, the gameplay is just without any serious faults. There's no glitches that are game breaking at all. There's not even very many visual glitches. Maybe a character's hair will flick about a bit weird, or the way they pull out their gun might look a bit strange, but they were few and far between. The gameplay is why the world feels so immersive. It's a truly immersive game. It sucks you in. The world looks great. The characters look great. The enemies look great. The feel of weapons, the feel of stealth, all just adds and pulls you into the world that has been created. We'll move on to the story now. I definitely recommend getting the game just based off of the gameplay, but obviously with it being The Last of Us, we have to talk about the storyline, because the first game is famous for how good its story was. It's not a first-person shooter or anything like that, so it's not all about gameplay and gun balance and this and that. It's all about that storyline. So, spoilers for people who haven't, played the game. If you played the first one, play the second one for sure. The story is only gets better. It is by far one of the best story-based games I've played since probably Last of Us 1. For me, this game was a perfect addition to the Last of Us world. When the script leaked and later when it was released, there was a lot of criticism and anger over some of the events in the game. So, major spoilers. The one I often see or hear about is the way that Joel was killed. Now, I had a friend say that he hated it, that Joel should have had some heroic death, or at least a peaceful one, rather than the brutal golf club murder at the hands of a vengeful Abby. However, I completely disagree. I felt that ideally Joel would have lived out his days to die as an old man, but the way he died fit the world perfectly. To have Joel die heroically would be to dismiss the tragedy that occurred when he saved Ellie. From Abby's point of view, this guy not only stole the one chance humanity had of stopping the infection, but he also killed her dad and destroyed the Fireflies as well, which was a group that she believed in and was a part of. It was entirely appropriate that Joel died in such a dark and unsatisfactory way. In a way, Joel did deserve some kind of penance. We already know from the first game that he's been a bandit, a smuggler, a murderer, and whilst he did all these things to keep on surviving, he was never portrayed as a good person. I love Joel, but the guy was just surviving, which required some bad actions. His death was a perfect example of how unforgiving this world is, and the game then carries on to show that seeking revenge only brings more pain. This is the main theme: revenge does nothing but cause pain. Playing as Ellie, there is this feeling of anger towards Abby and her group of friends, and I know that I got caught up in the despair at Joel's death, and was glad to start the stabbing and the killing of those responsible. But as the days in Seattle go on, we see the toll that Ellie's quest for justice is having on her Her loss of empathy is its own tragedy. She kills Abby's friend seemingly without any remorse till the ghastly murder of Owen and Mel, who is pregnant. To me, this is one of Ellie's darkest moments, and in a way it was hard to keep sided with her after this. I mean, it has to be said that Abby too was justified in some way when she killed Jesse. I mean, that's what the game tries to show, I think. We feel it much more when Jesse is killed by Abby, that we forget that Ellie has literally killed all of Abby's friends. Ellie's quest for revenge has only taken away. Nothing has been gained. There's no true justice has been given. This is then highlighted during the parts playing as Abby. We see her relationship with her friends. Some are good, some are bad. Her and Manny prove to be a great team and get on well. He has her back and she has his, which makes it hard to deal with when Tommy kills Manny. On the other side, her relationship with Mel is strained, and we see that Mel did not take Abby's vengeance against Joel well, in the end calling Abby a terrible person and telling her that she cannot go with her and Owen to Santa Barbara. This is sad because I find her relationship with Owen to be extremely interesting. We watched through flashbacks how they grew to be together while seeing them apart in the present, yet the feelings for each other are still there. Again, we're seeing how revenge does nothing but damage, as Abby and Owen still care for each other, yet it's quite obvious that her quest for revenge is what drove them apart. It makes his death as the last of the people she cares about all the more distressing. And it further shows how Ellie is only destroying in her revenge, which again makes it hard to side with her motivation, especially as we see Abby as this tortured, almost regretful character. Whether that's about Joel or about the effects that killing Joel had on her friends and her relationships with her friends, I don't know, but she's not complete after she got revenge on Joel. And I think the epitome of this theme comes at the end of Abby and Ellie's duel in the theatre. As Abby gains the upper hand and looks as though she will kill Ellie, Dina jumps in to save her. After a struggle and an arrow from Lev, Abby holds a knife to Dina's throat and says "good" upon hearing that she is pregnant, directly mirroring Mel being pregnant when Ellie kills her. Now, the interesting thing is Lev stops her and Abby spares both Dina and Ellie. Ellie's revenge almost got the one she loved killed, as well as herself and the unborn child. After all the damage she caused to Abby, all of the friends that she killed, in the end it means nothing as Abby leaves them both bleeding out on the floor. It is so tragic and lacks so much closure for Ellie that it's difficult to not at least revere Abby, if not stand with her. I wonder what might have occurred had Ellie won their fight. I must admit that I absolutely loved Abby by the end of the game. While she did kill Joel, it has to be forgiven as he caused her so much pain and it did nothing to help her emotionally. Her saving of Lev and Yara, I think, can be compared to Joel and Ellie in the first game. Both are broken people who have done terrible things in their lives, and the connection to Ellie for Joel and Lev for Abby are their ways of lightening the load that these characters both carry. I find it ironic that people hold such hatred for Abby yet don't see how similar her and Joel are. They idolise Joel, and yet Abby is left kind of as the enemy despite everything that she's had and playing as her and experience all of the pain that Ellie has caused. Also, playing as Abby, it has to be said that the attack on Haven is by far one of the most jaw-dropping levels in gaming. It's, one of the most standout parts of the game. Riding the horse through the fire, battling against scars and wolves alike. It's just it's intense, it's gritty, it really makes you, on the edge of the seat the whole time you're playing that level. It's incredible. After that part of the game, we find Ellie living with Dina and the baby on the farm that they talked about. But Ellie is still plagued by Joel's death. She has not got the closure that she wants, and once again she sets out to find Abby. The finale of the game is probably one of the most difficult fights I've ever had to do. Not because it is technically hard, but because I could just not bring myself to fight Abby again, especially as Abby is still looking after Lev, despite being a slave for the Rattlers. Her words, "I'm not doing this," after Ellie says she can't leave, is tragic and heartbreaking. Abby has a new meaning to live, and whether she regrets killing Joel or letting Ellie live aside, she does not want to fight again. It's as though all of her fighting up until this point means nothing to her now. She has a thing to live for. The fight is difficult because it is almost impossible to side with Ellie in this. She left Dina and the baby. She doesn't get to be more important than that, says Dina about their new family. As Ellie starts to win against the weakened Abby, the fight becomes harder and harder. The only semblance of hope comes as Ellie lets Abby up out of the water and allows her to leave. Whether it's her allowing Abby to live, or if Ellie realises finally that her vengeance won't make her whole again, I don't know. And as we watch Abby drive off into the fog, Ellie sits and sobs. It is poetic and soul-crushing at the same time. The whole game came down to this, and looking back at all that happened was death and loss. That's all that happened. To me, this game was perfect in its aim. It showed that revenge causes nothing but pain and suffering, and in the end, the only way to deal with loss was to allow an enemy to live. Ellie allows Abby to live, and in the end that turned out to be the closure that she needed, and it was the only way that she could return to a semi-normal life. And it's heartbreaking because all of the loss, all of Jesse's death, Joel's death, we saw Tommy get severely hurt, the strain on Ellie and Dina's relationship, all of Abby's friends, the death of Yara as well. All of it meant nothing to Ellie, who was simply trying to get revenge. And it's truly a saddening tale, and to me it is deserving of all the praise that it received, all of it. So I think to finish this, it's hard to criticise such a game, because whilst it's not Christopher Nolan, Twister, or a Apocalypse Now epic, it's its own realm of just constant. There's a depression that comes with this game. Whilst it's an incredibly gripping tale to play through, the whole time there is always that nagging in the back of your head of playing as Ellie. What she's doing isn't right. This is not the way that this should be handled. And especially as we get to the end of the game, her going after Abby again, and that fight in the sea is just, like I said, it's one of the most difficult parts of any game I've ever played, simply because you're trying to kill someone who has suffered far worse and has suffered even more pain and damage than Ellie has, and they're moving on, and yet Ellie just can't let Abby go. She can't break it. So I think it's a perfect storyline for me. Whether you agree or not, fair enough. Like, it's not for everyone, but for me it was perfect. The gameplay was just great. It's got its flaws. Some of the dialogue at the start between Ellie and Dina is a bit cringeworthy. Some of the dialogue throughout is a bit cringeworthy at times. But as a whole, it deserves all the praise and all the awards that it achieves for me. It's just great. And maybe this is a controversial opinion, but if they made a third game and you played as Abby or Lev, I would be entirely happy with that. I would not mind. I'm a bit of an Abby stan. I think scrapping out scars is one of the best things about the combat in this game. And I think Abby has a very compelling story arc and a very compelling motivation behind what she's doing. So I would happily play as Abby again in Last of Us 3, if there ever was a Last of Us 3. But yeah, I think overall solid gameplay, solid storyline, solid characters. There's not too much to fault, really. All I can say is either get the game yourself and play it, or I'll link my playthrough of it. I'll link my Last of Us 1 playthrough as well. Watch them both. Why not? Go back to back, because they are definitely two of the best games ever made. and deserve all of the praise and all of the playingness that they got. So yeah, go catch the playthrough, go get the game. Who knows what will be next? And yeah, peace out.